Hey everyone, it's Julia, or JD99, and today I have a special video. I just wrapped up a 6-month campaign with some friends of mine. It was inspired by Wizard 101 and the College of Winterhold from Skyrim. We played as these college mages who were sent on quests for practical experience. Here's their story. So for the players, first we have Felix, played by my friend Chris. He's a halfling divination wizard and was something of the party's tank. By making clever use of his portent abilities, he was able to avoid attacks and help his allies hit land. So many times I was like, okay, the bad guy rolls an 18 and swings his sword, and Chris would be like, nope, he rolled a 3. That really fed into the personality of Felix being like this chaotic trickster type. Then there was Alice, played by my friend Galen. She was the de facto leader of the group and their mouthpiece, highly charismatic and great at tearing into the bad guys. And then there was Kamaria, played by my friend Candace. She was an evocation wizard who was sort of the calm foil to the other two. If Alice was a lance and Felix was an axe, then Kamaria was like a dagger. Unassuming, but well wielded, so that it could take you down before you knew what was happening. They also each had a special magic item. Felix had the Physician's Ring, which let him cast Cure Wounds. Kamaria had the Lens of the Inquisitor, which once per day could let her read any language. And then Alice had the Necklace of the Silver Tongue, which let her cast Command. Now, their first mission was for a professor who was doing potions research. She needed to find a magical mushroom, and the party also had a friend named Nick, who was a plant wizard, aka a botanomancer, and he asked them to help them find a magical plant sample. And remember Nick, he'll be important later, but I'm just going to put him off to the side. So the party heads off to a magical forest called the 50-Mile Woods. When they entered, they got attacked by a Grimlock, which is like a small giant. And this was the first encounter of the campaign, so the first time they were fighting together. A lot of fun, although Alice accidentally set some of the trees on fire. Luckily, they were able to put it out before it spread, too much. After that, they searched for the grotto where these magical mushrooms grow. When they found one, they see that there are also these brilliant flowers that glow a little, growing all over the grotto. But the thing of most interest is that after they were there for a few minutes, a strange man with light green skin appeared. He was a fae named Adriel, and this was his garden. He lets them have the mushrooms that they wanted, but his flowers were very special to him, so he asked for a trade. Now, this was also where Felix managed to antagonize the Faerie a bit. Alice tried to take over negotiations, but it didn't really go very far. When Adriel was distracted, however, Felix managed to steal one of the flowers. So the party left, and Alice and Kamaria thought it was without the flower. But back at the college, they are determining what they collected. They get some potion ingredients, and their gardener friend is very happy about the flower that he got for them. But the party does begin to wonder if what Felix did will ever catch up with them. Who knows? And also while there, they meet up with their rivals, a mean girl trio named Melinda, Belinda, and Trelinda. They are the sort you just love to hate. They didn't really play any much significant role in the campaign. They were just there to make the party feel superior. They did not even really receive much of a storyline. Their next quest has them going down to investigate a series of disappearances in town. They go to a poor neighborhood called Peddler's Quarter, meeting with the select woman there named Shortclaw, who explains that she thinks that there's some sort of serial killer, and she wants it dealt with quietly before it leads to wide-scale panic. And she has them meet with a gravedigger named Greystone, who leads them to a crypt in the graveyard. Down there, they find an old shrine to the god Porthum, the death god who's basically the ferryman in this cosmology. He guides souls down the river Styx. And a guy named Colin is down there who turned that shrine into an impromptu chapel. Further through the tunnels, past several encounters with rats and zombies and in across the pit, they find the killer in the boss chamber. He's a necromancer with zombies to help him. Greystone recognizes the killer, though. It's his brother, Oakland. So the two sides fight, and while doing this, a thought occurs to Alice. Wait. Why is this guy wearing a creepy necromancer robe if he's down here all alone? Who is that for? Is he trying to impress his own zombies? This line of thinking went on for a while, and Alice just roasted the hell out of the wizard. Yeah, he's a serial killer, but his real crime is that outfit. So they bring him back alive so that he can face justice, and select woman Shortclaw doesn't have much gold to reward the party with, but she gives Alice instead a magic tattoo. She explains that she is 1/8 Tabaxi, and her family faced prejudices for many generations. At the beginning of her political career, she suppressed that part of herself, but after a few years, she decided that she would rather be hated for the truth than loved for a lie. So she moved to the peddler's quarter to become an advocate for the poor. And this cat tattoo is something that her grandmother taught her, that when activated could basically give the wielder the abilities of a cat once per day. Spoiler, she never actually ends up using it in the campaign, but it was a fun character detail. So they do a good job, and that gets the party recognized by the army. And they meet an officer named Lieutenant Volloway, who comes to the college to offer them a job. See, there's an old Warforged body that the army needs reclaimed, and it's in a cabin relatively close to where the college is. In between missions, Alice goes to the arts department of the college. She gets there some music training, which lets her take her first level in Bard. She also joins the quote-unquote Bard's Guild, which is an honorary group formed for Jake Actor, one of the greatest bards of all time. It is said that he had a legendary sword that only a true performer could wield, and he was interred with it and left it as an open challenge for any aspiring bard to find his tomb and claim the weapon. By the way, this whole thing is a reference to a player in an old campaign. Jake, if you're watching this, hi! Next, they decide that they want to do a quest for their friend Nick. He's been researching spells and magic to promote plant growth and make plants healthier, and the goal of his research is to improve crop yields. So he has them go to a village called Riverwheat to deliver some seeds that he's been working on and collect a soil sample. And since they now have some money, they go ahead and buy a donkey with a cart to move their supplies with them. So on the road then, they find a dead body. No clear sign of death, but they decide that they want to honor whoever this is. And on him, they find a symbol of the goddess of sharks. So they take him to a river, Felix says some nice words on the man's behalf, and they lay him adrift. It was a nice moment, and actually a little bit comes up later, this idea of Felix, saying prayers for the dead, but hold on to that. What isn't so nice is that while they're back on the road, they get attacked by a bunch of lizard folk bandits. This was a fun little skirmish that was meant to set up a story arc where they investigate a local bandit ring, but we unfortunately didn't get the chance to explore that. So they make it to the town of Riverwheat, and their contact there was a man named Remy Benedict, and he was a cross between a municipal clerk, the schoolmaster, and the town's priest. He took the seeds from them, but also asked for their help with a large ant problem the town had. And by that, I mean a problem with large ants. They previously had asked the Transmutation School to help them growing their crops, and the mages there tried to magnify some of the wheat plants, but in the process also caused an anthill to grow. Now, something I want to make clear here, and something I did make clear to the party, is that this was a completely optional side mission. If they did it, they could be greatly rewarded, but it was also very dangerous. This is something I like to throw into campaigns. High risk, high reward. Like an optional boss fight that you might see in a classic RPG. So they decided to take it on. And I had planned this to be something of a dungeon crawl, but they wisely decided not to climb inside of the mound of giant ants. Instead, they enlisted the help of all of the townsfolk. They dug a massive trench from the river to the anthill and dug a moat all around the anthill. While this was happening, they also poured basically every flammable substance they could find. Cooking oil, grain, liquor, you name it. And this was all part of their plan to set the hill on fire. And through this, they also made friends with one of the villagers, a boy who, since he wasn't quite the age of 14, wasn't allowed to work on the trench, but he did act for multiple support. So they, light the fuse, set the entire anthill on fire. This kills most of the ants, but many still swarm out, including the queen and multiple warriors protecting her. And this became the tensest battle of the campaign. One ant on its own is easily defeatable by the players, but there were so many, and the ants were working as a team. And the queen ant even had special pheromone attacks that she could use to power up her allies. They almost died multiple times. When the dust cleared, they just barely managed to kill all but one ant. Kamaria was facing it alone. She got hit bad. She fell to 0. She was about to die. When out of nowhere, who should come to her rescue but Jeremy? Using his crossbow, he put a bolt clean through the head of the final ant, and it died. Unfortunately, though, not before it ate Kamaria's hand. Yes, a player character lost a hand. No, I'm not sorry. They knew the risk when they took this quest. So after they return to the college, they meet up with Nick to give him a soil sample, and he tells them that the army has been funding his research. War has been brewing, and they want to make sure that the nation's food supply is stable. So when the party tells him that they are going to the abandoned village of Logger's Post to get the Warforged body, he tells them that in his research he had discovered that that village had a procedure for magically helping trees grow, since their principal industry had been logging. And if they can help him get onto that, it'll be the last piece they need. So they agreed to go off to Logger's Post for the finale. And on the way there, though, they're stopped by a strange man who offers them 1,000 gold pieces to assassinate an army officer at a nearby outpost. They tell him they'll think about it, but they decide not to. They make it to Logger's Post, and while investigating the village, several frog warriors drop from roofs and attack. It's a frog ambush. After fighting for a bit, they realize that this won't work, and only one of them speaks common, so they're not completely able to ask them to stop exactly. So instead, Alice uses her command spell on who seems to be the frog leader and orders him to stand down. He does so, and this gives them just enough time to run for cover at a nearby tavern. They run inside and bar the door. After a little bit, the frog comes over to speak with them and discuss terms. Turns out he only attacked because his leader gave an order to kill or chase off any humanoids who enter the town. The leader is a frog whose name roughly translates to Raintree Eggbreaker, and he's something of a tyrant. And the frog they're speaking to, his name is best pronounced in their tongue, Bula Gul, and he wanted help overthrowing Raintree. If the party does that, the frogs will help the party with anything else they need. So the party agrees to help him, but first they want to get the Warforged body. Bula escorts them to the old cabin of the mage that's now in, and he warns them that it's very dangerous. And this cabin was something of a mini dungeon. Different rooms had different features, and some of the doors were stuck, so they had to try to force it open with a strength check. And forcing those stuck doors open would cause ceiling tiles to fall, causing bludgeoning damage, like a trap. So they are wizards trying to break down doors. The funniest part about this is that in the very final room they explored, the one just to the right of the entrance was the tool storage. It had axes and crowbars they could have used to open the doors. Also in the cabin was a small chapel to the goddess Lethe. She represents being forgotten after death and the memories that are lost to the world after we pass. It is said that she holds in her mind the names of all those who ever lived, even those with no one to mourn them. She holds an eternal vigil. Players clean it up, and Felix made a spontaneous decision to dedicate himself to this divinity. In doing so, giving him an upgrade to his ring. It could now cast more spells and let him do unarmed magic damage. After this, they went to the top of the house. In the dining room and kitchen, they found the body of the Warforged. The problem is that it wasn't exactly dead. It was walking around, possessed by its own dark spirit. They had to take it out, and the two animated armors that were backing it up. The Warforged was wearing a dark magical robe, which Alice had a lot of fun mocking him for. Like, why are all of these weird necromancer types wearing dark robes? Are they getting them from the same place? So she tried using vicious mockery on it, but, these constructs are immune to psychic damage. It was still a really fun battle, though. Felix had to burn his last spell slot in the final round. Had it gone any further, it could have completely turned against the party. And after defeating the Warforged and letting its soul find peace, Alice took the cloak for herself. It's a magic cloak that helps with stealth. So after a night's rest, they move on to the political assassination. Eggbreaker is in the old town hall. As good a place as any for him to run his new town from. It's about 2 stories tall, and on the first floor they have to find a key from one room and narrowly avoid getting into a pit trap. Because rather than crossing a room with a suspicious looking rug, Felix sends his familiar to fly across and get the key. Then that gives him an idea. He sends the bird outside to look through the second story windows, and doing this he's able to get a good look at where all the bad guys are. So after fighting through a room of giant frogs on the first floor, they make it up to the second. By making a lot of noise, they're able to cause some frog warriors to come out of the boss chamber to investigate, and they decide to fight them in waves, rather than being swarmed all at once. It also turned the battle map from being just the one office to being the whole second floor. They are now in the art gallery with 4 paintings. One of a kitchen with bread on the table, one of pirates digging up treasure, one of someone shining light on a tree sapling, and one of a bonfire. Now, they tried to set up an ambush, but realized that the other frogs were also trying to set up an ambush, and that it would just stand in an impasse for several minutes. So they decided to take the chance for a surprise attack. They needed to get to the main office. Problem? The door's locked. Now, in the intended solution to this was that there was a key behind the painting with the buried treasure. Instead, they decided to take the elemental approach. By blasting the door with Firebolt and Rays of Frost, they caused the lock to expand and contract enough to crack open. From there, they kicked down the door, and it became a full combat against the Frog Warriors. Now, the main bad guy, Eggbreaker, was a Grung monk. He was a ton of fun to build. His primary gimmick was trying to lay hands on the party as much as possible in order to poison them. Felix wound up facing off against him, since using his divination luck, he was able to avoid so many attacks, while Kamaria and Alice mopped up all of his hench frogs. Felix cast Blur on himself to make him even harder to hit. And then Eggtree tried to do a jump kick. Cue one of the best rolls of my DMing career. He originally had an 18, but because of the disadvantage, that re-rolled to a 1. I decided to play it as he missed the jump so badly that he fell through his own hole in the floor that he had tried to use as a hazard against the combatants. Alice then walked up, leaning over the edge, and just finished him off with vicious mockery. A monk who can't land a jump in his own arena really writes itself. Then this brings us to the last part of the campaign. The frog people want the party to help them with one more thing. The temple has been overgrown with dangerous plants. If the party could clear it out and reconsecrate it, it would mean a lot to the frogs. It's also likely where the rest of the information they need for Nick is. Now, this temple is something of a 4-part boss fight. In order to access the sanctuary, they had to defeat 4 large plant monsters. Each has a different theme that was hinted at through paintings outside of the room. So, a lightning plant with a storm painting, fire plant with volcano painting, poison with a snake, and ice with snowy winter mountains. First one that they went to was the fire plant, and Alice got caught up in a vine, so it became a desperate struggle to free her before she could be crushed and burned to death. That battle was an intense showdown. After that, though, it just kept getting easier for the players. Now, these plants were designed as something of glass cannons. Not high health or defense, but really good damage. Felix was able to turn the tide on the last 2 by getting 2 nat 20s on his opening attacks. 4d10 firebolts against a creature with 30 health. The real MVP, though, was Kamaria. She managed to finish 3 of the 4 off using her frostbite. The only one that she couldn't do that on was, the winter plant, since it resists cold, but luckily Felix easily burned that away. Also during this boss fight was one of the plants was attacking against Alice, but it had disadvantage on attack because of one of Kamaria's ace attacks, so it went from being a nat 20 to a natural 1. One of the very few times I've actually seen that in my DMing career, and that was amazing. This overall was just a really great, final boss situation to wrap up the campaign. After that, they made it to the temple sanctuary, and the prayer book they need to read from, though, is in an unknown script. But luckily, Kamaria can use her glasses. By reciting from the book, she's able to perform the ritual. Spiritual energy fills the temple, and it has been reconsecrated. In doing so, she also finds the final part of the research that Nick needs is in the back of the missile. And the frogs don't necessarily need the book, so they just bring the whole thing home for Nick. They head back out and swing by the military outpost to drop off the Warforged body. They're paid for it, and they learn that this model of Warforged was designed to hunt down magic items. That's how it wound up in the mage's cabin, and that's why it was wearing the cloak. Then they return home, and who do they run into at the castle? But Melinda, Belinda, and Trolinda. Chris decides that he's finally had enough of these 3, and it's the final session anyway. So he drops a fireball on them, which burns away their disguise, revealing them as 3 she-devils. The party saved the college from their evil. And that's basically how the campaign wraps up. They help establish this town, do some work for the army, and then go home to give their book to the friend Nick. They then bring it full circle by talking to the dean who gave them their first set of missions. He thanks them for their work, and then there's a bit of sequel bait by giving them a special invitation. The High Queen of the Elves is assembling elite adventurers to help her with some special missions. Due to changing life circumstances, we had to calm the campaign a little earlier than we had expected, but we still had plenty of time to get to a nice conclusion. And I also had time to make this slideshow inspired by Fallout New Vegas. And so the Band of the Flaming Rose returned to their dorm for some well-earned rest. Oakland Ashsword was found guilty of 6 counts of murder and unlicensed necromancy within the confines of the city. For this he was sentenced to death. His brother's testimony was central to the conviction. On the day Oakland was to be hung, however, he disappeared from his cell. The only thing remaining in it was a single, beautiful rose. After his brother Oakland was brought into custody, Greystone Ashsword took over the catacombs beneath Peddler's Quarter. With Colin's help, he devoted himself to the god Portham at the chapel, and made the whole tunnel system a temple. After the killing shone a light on the conditions of Peddler's Quarter, Select Woman Shortclaw was able to secure better funding for her district. A school was soon built to give opportunities to the children of the area. The area also benefited from increased traffic, as college mages came to learn from the site where the poorly dressed necromancer had prowled. Using the notes secured for him, Nick creates magical procedures for protecting crops and encouraging plant growth. For his achievement, he was given an associate professorship and had his research funded for years. When tales of Alice's adventurings began to circulate, the Bards Guild gains new interest in seeking the sword of Jake Actor. A group of adventurous bards starts to plan a journey to track it down. By combining their farming expertise with Nick's research and using the ant meat as plant food, Riverwheat creates a stable, blight-resistant crop which far succeeds historic yields. Armed with a crossbow and sense of adventure and knowledge of improvised explosives, Jeremy the Antslayer set out to seek the world. He would in time become known as one of the greatest monster hunters of his day. After the defeat of Raintree Eggbreaker, Bula Gul rises as the Mayor Vicar of Loggers Post. He's considered to be a fair, if eccentric ruler who makes the village a haven for his fellow frog people. Alifai Valoway negotiates terms with Bula to annex Loggers Post. The town receives official recognition while still able to maintain its autonomy. For his efforts, Valoway is promoted to captain and given jurisdiction over the town's guard. And so the Band of the Flaming Rose declare their mission a success. And though their story may continue, they know that they have reached the end of a chapter. To be continued. Thanks for playing. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story of this campaign. It was really nice to get back into, playing D&D again. That's going to be all for today. If you want more story time, I'll link below to the Water Temple adventure from my old Enter the Dungeon campaign. What do you think of the story? Put your thoughts in the comments below. Till then, have a great day, and God bless.